How do I possibly wrap my head around this?
Your authority.
You know, Dad, have you seen Dad where they go into the hospital as John and whoever, and they come out and use Dad, and their life changes? There you go. Second child, it really changes.
Township of West Lincoln Administration Finance Fire Committee agenda for Monday, November the 21st. Notice to all members of the public, but there is nobody here from the public tonight. I'm the chair, Mike Rayner. Any change in order for items on the agenda from any members of committee? The mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if we could move up the report on the ward boundary review to right after Dr. Williams' presentation.
Sure. All members of committee, is that acceptable? Okay.
We're making it up.
Too bad. Too bad.
Anybody else have anything?
You want to go home? You want to go home?
Disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest? Any members of the committee? No, seeing none? Okay, appointments. A, 86-16, Dr. Robert Williams' presentation, ward boundary review, final report. For the attached PowerPoint presentation and ward boundary review options report, RFD-C-16 2016 below. Dr. Williams, you gonna have a presentation, sir?
Thank you. All right, you got me started here. I hope I didn't mess that up. All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here in West Lincoln again to, I hope, conclude this study for you. Not sure I've actually got this started here, so bear with me a sec. Where are we? Get the whole page? All right, anyway, let's leave it at that. The report was circulated ahead of time, and I'm sure those who are interested have had a chance to read it. And I suspect that that's most everybody. All right. I'm just trying to work through my document here. I'm not sure why we're not going the right way, but okay. Help.
From the beginning?
I guess I better no.
Excuse me.
Yeah, the next page isn't there. I want to run the show.
Yeah, it's usually just from the beginning. Everything's frozen.
Like the weather.
Did you turn it on a while ago? Everything's frozen. Yeah, let's just see.
Let me just take.
Oh, I know why.
There
Because you
we-
have this.
Oh, okay. And I do this? No, I just, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
Here we
yeah.
go. Okay. All right, thank you. I'm reviewing the basic background here for anyone who is not familiar with the development of the township and thinking outside this room in terms of the background to how you got to where you are. And I always find that this is an important part of reviews of this kind. The many cases, and yours is a classic example, the wards that are currently in place were essentially used from the beginning of the township's creation and were based on the three original component parts. So we're now many years after that, but those boundaries have still remained in place for the election of members of council. So part of the story here has to be moving toward the possibility of change. And I asked this basic question. I asked it in the first report. I ask it again now. Does this configuration provide effective and equitable representation to the residents of West Lincoln? It may have been a system that had merit in 1970. 2016, we need to ask ourselves, does it still work? I think you know the answer to that question that I provide, but the logic is there. We're working in an area in which there is no legislative requirement to review this system. It's one of the reasons why a system established in 1970 is still in place. There are very few other political arrangements that have not changed in that period of time, but this is one of them. The other part of this scenario is that there is no guidance whatsoever provided by the province. They don't tell you when, they don't tell you how, they don't tell you what to keep in mind. They provide virtually no guidance on what this ought to look like. So the review that is going on here is works from a very simple two statements in the Municipal Act. One in Section 217, which gives you the power to determine what it calls the composition of council. That is the number of members of council. As long as you've got at least 5 people, one of them is the mayor, then it's up to you to decide how many and in what arrangement you want to make. Elect them all at large, elect them in 2 wards, 3 wards, 4 wards, whatever. That is, all it says is you have the power to do that. And then Section 222 simply assigns to the municipality, acting through a bylaw, to, quote, divide or redivide the municipality into wards or to dissolve the existing wards, end of quote. That's all it says. You have the power. But, as I said, no timetable. So, in January 2016, Council authorized a comprehensive and independent ward boundary review. By that, I mean that it is not simply minor adjustments. It's not simply looking at one part. It's looking at the whole pattern of representation for the township. And as I go through this, some of these questions have been raised and set aside, but we've looked at them all in some fashion. It's also independent. That's why I'm here to do it. Again, the Act doesn't make it clear how that should happen. But the goal, I think, in a democracy of our kind anyway, is that there should not be political interference in the rules for elections. And that covers a whole range of things, and this is one of them, where what we want to do is minimize the involvement of the people with, shall we say, a stake in the outcome. And I'm going off script here a little bit here, but what we're trying to do is establish a system that to the community is seen as fair and is as neutral, if I can call it that, as possible. So we're trying to step back from the idea that this is entirely up to council to decide. You get the last word, and as you would all know, you got some of the first words. I talked to all of you who were on council at that time about what this review might involve and what kinds of things to keep in mind. I use that as a way to help understand the community, but it was not a case of going to each of you and saying, okay, tell me what the line should be, and coming back under the pretense that it's independent. I listened to you. I tried to make those ideas work as best I could under the constraints that I had, but it is independent. So back in June, we released a discussion paper which went through many of these same points, the whole background for a study, some guiding principles that were established in the original terms of reference, explaining what those are, where they come from, what sort of things they entail. I undertook then an evaluation of the present system using those same principles. Did it meet those expectations? And to turn it around, if I could put it this way, and I think I did in the document, if you were to design a system today using those principles, would it look like the one you've got now? And as again you would know, I concluded that that would not be a likely outcome. And then the report went on to offer some preliminary options for what the Act calls a redivision. So the ward boundary review is framed in the original document that came from the clerk. It provided what are called guiding principles that were established, and I quote it here, in order to provide an effective and equitable system of representation. So my guideline came from that. The goal was to aim for representation by population, aim, in other words, for parity, equal representation in each of the wards. We were to aim to protect communities of interest and neighborhoods in the design of wards. I was encouraged to use natural physical features or natural barriers as boundaries where possible. We were asked also to consider variations in population density. In other words, the township has differing degrees of density, and the ward should reflect that. We also see in here a reference that the review should be mindful of future population growth projections. So in other words, the boundaries that might be approved right now should be useful for the township rather, over at least 2 elections. So we're not basing it on where we are now, but if possible, looking forward. And the next bullet makes that more explicit, to develop a ward structure that will accommodate growth and population shifts for at least 3 municipal elections. And so that suggests a couple of things to me. One is that at that time, after those 3 elections, it would be time to review it again. At the very latest, you put it in place and you move it forward. And that's, again, building on the absence that's in the Act, where the Act doesn't tell you you have to do it at all. This is basically saying, this is not a permanent feature. This is something to get us through 3 elections, and then we look at it again. The terms of reference also directed me that, or at least kept in mind, that the process may generate discussions and/or review relating to the composition or size of council. Again, back to that section 217. It didn't say keep 6 councilors. It didn't say change to 8. It didn't say change at all. It just said, have a look at whether that number is still appropriate in doing this review. So a process began last winter. I did research that was open to me in terms of the origins of the township, some of the basic features of its demographics, the layout of the land, if you will, the location of the major population centers. I did interviews with each of you and with staff as well to get a better sense of some of the background to the points that we were asked to look at in this review. We did the discussion paper with options and held public consultations in June that were publicized in 3 different locations in the township, and I'm back with a final report with a recommendation, or at least with a choice of a recommendation. So this brings us to where we are now. And I laid the report out to pick up on some of those bigger questions first. The composition of council question. There was no appetite, and I think that's the phrase I used, there was no appetite in any of the discussions to change the number from 6. Yes, there's growth. Yes, there are workload issues, perhaps. There are questions of managing the business of the township. But the basic feeling was that the mayor and 6 councilors was an appropriate number, and I heard nothing to suggest otherwise at this point. So we work with that perspective. There was also no appetite, and I think a strong case to be made to keep wards in West Lincoln. The idea of simply throwing all of those offices open to one electorate, one election, seemed to me to miss the very important distinctions that are here between Smithville and the rural areas, and even within the rural areas. It would also mean, I think, from the point of view of the role of the representative, in a sense, 7 people doing the same thing. Everybody trying to appeal to everybody, everybody canvassing everywhere, everybody basically being at the end of the phone for everybody. And I felt that was not really the appropriate way to go, especially for part-time counselors, to basically have to be campaigning and dealing with potential requests all across the township. Now, you need to spend time in various parts of the township, be aware of what's going on. But in terms of your accountability and your representation, I felt that keeping wards was the best direction to go, rather than eliminating them. So that, again, was part of 222. We're setting that aside. One of the more interesting complications, if you will, in all of this was the two-member ward model. You've had that from the beginning. In many cases, and I have a personal bias in this, I've tried to encourage people that I've worked with, communities that I've worked with, to move toward single-member wards. Partly, again, it comes back to the accountability question. It also tends to mean you can fine-tune your representation a little bit better. If you kept, for example, you had 6 people in 6 wards, you wouldn't have to be quite the wards wouldn't have to be quite as large as they would here. But there is the proverbial elephant in the room, or we're sitting in the elephant. I don't know how to put it. The point, Smithville, of course, is a community that, given the terms of reference, we don't want to divide it. We're encouraged not to divide that community of interest, which means creating 2 single-member wards based in Smithville becomes a challenge at the moment. There's not an old and new Smithville. There's not a north and south. There's not anything to me that was obvious that said, okay, you can split it in half and end up with wards that made sense. Having said that, having 2 members in one ward and 1 member in the others also struck me as something that is really not terribly fair. If you happen to live outside a ward that elects 2 people, you get to elect 1/6 of council. You live in that ward, you get to elect 1/3 of council. And in the notion of equity or fairness, I feel that's not a desirable direction to go. So, not so much by default, but by process of weighing up representation issues, I concluded, and again heard this, that keeping 2-member wards is the direction that is appropriate for the moment for West Lincoln. And again, if you've been through the report, you will see that may be something that we need to consider in future, but not right now. We'll come to that in a moment. One of the other things that's important here is that this review is based on numbers related to the population, not the electorate. My friends who are clerks work with electors. That's how they organize their activities. How many people are going to turn up to vote at certain locations? How many ballots do we need to print? All those kinds of things have to do with electors. But representation on a whole range of levels, and I won't go into them now, is really about population. So I have to admit, we had to struggle to find numbers that we could feel were reliable, and we made some decisions working with town staff, working with the region, officials at the region, to come up with some numbers that we would apply in this exercise that would help us understand the population of West Lincoln in this review. Okay, so this is the boundaries, these are the boundaries rather that we are currently working with. I did spend some time in that earlier report talking about some of the flaws. A couple of them jump out immediately. One is the fact that there are parts of Smithville that are located in Ward 2 and other parts in Ward 3, and not by any kind of, I just don't mean this in an insulting way, not by any kind of logic, if I can call it that, to say these areas clearly belong in one area. It's the accident of growth. The other part, of course, is that interesting squiggly line up there on the west side, which follows a natural boundary, but it's a natural boundary that really doesn't work very well. It's not a very coherent line, more importantly, there were questions of the population imbalance among the 3 wards. And this chart here is my summary. Again, you will have seen it in the first report, trying to apply the principles to the current system and finding that, and I'll come back to population in a moment, but finding that really it doesn't tick very many boxes as a good system in the light of the principles that we looked at. The one major difficulty here and in the proposals that come forward has to do with population, and I will refer to that in a moment. Everything to do with population is part of a specific approach that is in the current system and in the two proposals, and I'll come to those in a moment. So I offered 2 alternative ward designs. We had 4 of them in the first round, collected some comments and responses from various in various ways, and I did further analysis, took those away, and basically consolidated them into 2 alternatives. They make certain assumptions. Again, 3 wards, 2 members. One of them is based in Smithville, explicitly based in Smithville, as opposed to the current one, which has Smithville and a lot of other territory. And by doing things that way, I believe the division of communities of interest is minimal. There are virtually no cases where a community of interest is divided in these boundaries. The part that's tricky, given the 3-ward model and the 2 members per ward, is the implicit overrepresentation of rural residents. It would be, I think, clearly more desirable to have a system in which all the wards were roughly the same size in population. But there was no way I could make that work with only 3 parts. Smithville is, as I've said, I think in the text there or elsewhere, Smithville's too big to be 1 ward, but too small to be 2 wards. So it's stuck in between, and you're living with an imbalance. So however you cut it, you're going to have a population imbalance, which is the point in that previous chart. So neither alternative meets all of the principles, and the way I've been going about this, if I look at that population factor and one of the wards is outside the range, I simply say that design is not acceptable on that terms. Now, when you've got 8 or 10 or 12 wards, as I've done in other cases, having 1 ward outside is not too bad. And you try to keep them to a minimum. With only the 3 and this clear cluster of population, it becomes very difficult. And there's no point in me coming and saying, oh yeah, the population's balanced. Everybody can see it's not. And we simply have to acknowledge that given those other factors that I've just talked about, it's not going to be balanced. So, 2 options with, as I said, consistent assumptions just described. And as you will have looked at very carefully, I'm sure, there's really 2 major, well, there's not a lot of moving parts in here, but there's 2 major things. One is the question of a line between proposed wards 1 and 2. And the second part is the line around Ward 3. And without getting ahead of myself, in a sense, those 2 things are interchangeable. Option 1 meets the community perspective, the community of interest criterion. It meets the variation in density. It allows for effective representation because a rural ward is really a rural ward. An urban ward is an urban ward. It's not a bit of both. The population question becomes tricky, and natural boundaries, frankly, are not terribly important in terms of designing wards in West Lincoln because it's pretty flat territory and not a lot of other things that would work in. So, you know, it's an improvement on a couple of parts. The option 2, as I suggested a moment ago, is slightly different configuration around Ward 3 and essentially retains the old Ward 1-2 boundary. And when we use that one, again, I see both options as having similar attributes. The choices before you, there are a couple of things I should go back to. And I think the text covers it rather than here. One of the main differences in those 2 options is whether you seek a population balance primarily between wards 1 and 2, or whether you look to territory. And I've heard from some of you, again, people who've been on council for a while and who are serving in current wards 1 and 2, there's a lot of territory to cover. You're part-time, you've got a lot of things to deal with. One of these options tries to equalize the territory with an impact on population. The other equalizes the population with an impact on territory. So those are parts of the two that I'm happy to talk about in a moment. So the choices, it seems to me tonight for you are, despite what I've just said, you could decide to just say, this is all more trouble than it's worth. Let's just have no wards and just go to an at-large system. I would not recommend that. I would recommend that you do keep the 3 wards and not go. But again, you get the last word on this. I would not encourage you to do that. You could also do nothing, right? Off I go, take my fee and leave, and you've got a report and you don't do anything. You're, again, free to do that. There's no obligation on you to act. However, as we've seen in a sense in both reports, I recommend that the current wards be redivided, that it keep wards, but don't leave them the way they are for reasons that we've already talked about. And again, it's a recommendation. You're free to choose to follow that or not. Or select option 1 or option 2. Those are the 2 redivisions that I have determined can work for the moment in West Lincoln and are both defensible. They're both improvements. They're both defensible. I do not favor one over the other. As I said a moment ago, there's a slightly different mix of population versus area. I think both are defensible as improvements on the current system. Okay. One of the things that's important in here, and again, it doesn't appear in the text, given that you've had the same boundaries in place since 1970, and given what I've learned about West Lincoln, the idea of throwing it all out and starting with something totally different is not likely to be something you are attracted to. So what I've offered you in this report are 2, I believe, relatively modest modifications. This is a kind of an incremental change. It's something that will address the dilemmas without creating a completely new system. However, again, in reference to the Smithville population, and you can't deny that it's here, you can't deny that it's going to continue to grow, 2-member, 3-ward model will either drastically underrepresent Smithville under this or drastically overrepresent it if you somehow make 2 wards that are based in Smithville and everybody else gets 1 ward. It's just very difficult to make those scenarios work given the distribution of population in your municipality. So my sense is that I encourage you to pick one or the other of these 2 options, but be clear that you can't let it last. You can't leave it there for another 40 years or even necessarily another 12 years. Because the evidence I have collected suggests that within a very short time, the population in the current Ward 3 will be over half the population of the whole township. So a system in which half the population gets a third of the seats is as unfair as a situation where half the population gets 2/3 of the seats. You've got to try to find a way to balance that off. And that means essentially thinking the whole thing through again, rather than simply adjusting it, which is the direction I took, as I said, because I didn't feel that there was a big appetite for something completely different. So my encouragement to you, if you can make a decision about one of these options, begin to think about maybe there's another way to do it. Maybe there's another way to think about how we should represent the West Lincoln community around our council table. Gee, you might even have to add another seat, or you might have to reconfigure the chamber. But think about where this township is going over the next little while. And we were just conferring before the meeting, Bill 68 which is currently before the legislature, in passing includes the possibility, in fact, more than that, it includes the direction that regional governments must review their council composition after every 2 elections. If this is implemented in the current legislative session, that would mean that Niagara Region, at the latest after 2 elections, would have to decide how many seats its member municipalities might have. That might be the trigger for something like this. Maybe, though, that growth in Smithville itself would be enough to say, maybe we better think about how to do this. And I just leave that as a suggestion. I'm not looking for work. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you've got a system that is constrained by history. In some ways, it's constrained by the distribution of population, but it need not be the only way to do it. And as I said, maybe I was being overly cautious. I just said I don't think you're ready to do that just yet, but don't forget it. It's out there. So I think that's all that I had on there. So I will stop there and in your hands.
Great. Thank you for that presentation, Dr. Williams. I'm going to open it up now to members of the committee. Do you have any questions with regards to this discussion? Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. Very good, very concise, and I can follow your logic. I really do. I can, without a doubt. And at this point in time, I'm leaning towards one or the other, and I will say that later when we actually get into the body of the report, which way I'm leaning. But the initial question that I do have is that it doesn't matter if you take option 1 or option 2. You've got a very big area, and what I'm thinking is that where would you have the polling booths now? Because if you just take, doesn't matter, option 1 or option 2, the real difference is either it's Case to Gainsborough Town Line Road or following along Regional Road 14. So let's just take the new Ward 1. Having one polling booth means that even if you put it in the middle, it means that someone has to really drive a little extra longer way in order to get to that polling booth. So in designing this, have you not made the township incur a few more costs at election time as far as, selecting polling booths?
I didn't deliberately do that. The idea of how you organize your election really is a follow-on, and I didn't really get into those details, and I'd be happy to defer to the clerk on how that may be done. Certainly, if you're using municipally owned facilities, and that is often the case, yeah, there may be certainly some limitations there. Perhaps, though, in the light of these changes, you might have to be creative and find other locations. I'm not sure whether there's other polling methods. That's also been part of the Municipal Act that, and I sometimes if I say the word mail-in ballots, people cringe. They don't like, or online balloting. There are a number of other ways that may be open to reduce that. But in answer to your first question, no, I did not build this around having a facility in a central location or even a location within a ward. No, I didn't do that.
Okay, thank you. My second question through you, Mr. Chair, is that you talk about Bill 68 and that the region will have to look at their composition. Do you think that composition? Do you think that they will have to look at that composition in 2026 or in 2030? You say 8 years out. So are you saying 8 years out from 2018 or from now?
I have to say I'm relying on a fairly quick read of the sections of the bill today. My understanding is that if a region has made a change in the current term, they don't have to do it until after 2026. Niagara did not make a change, so I'm guessing it's got to be before 22, I think. I better not say for sure.
Okay.
You'll have to check that section, but those regions that have not gone through a change now will have to act sooner. And then after that, it will be after every 2 elections. And it may be that it's that you do a review, or the region does a review and said, it's fine the way it is. I'm not getting into how that fight might play out. Okay. But the point is, it's like one of the early slides. Nobody's ever had to do it. you just sort of let it slide until there's enough fuss or enough noise or whatever. And the two regions that I know that have gone through this in the last 6 or 8 months, Halton and Durham, had a very, very difficult time getting it on the agenda, letting alone getting to a conclusion. That may, at least it'll be on an agenda. How much of a fight goes on, I don't know, but certainly Niagara would be sooner than those two cases, as I read the act.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, I just want to say, Doctor, thank you for the report. Thank you for the time that you spent with the residents of West Lincoln and with our staff, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other members of the committee have any questions at this time?
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, we're now going to deal with the item.
And we can discuss that.
Yeah, they'll bring it up after this.
And I'd be quiet, and I'm quiet. I think.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, we can proceed then to item as our mayor asked to be brought forward next, item A89-16, I believe.
Yeah.
And I will read that now. Recommendation report, RFD-C-16-2016 Ward Boundary Review Options Report. Recommendation 1, that report RFD-C-16-2016 dated November 21st, 2016 regarding ward boundary review options report be received. And 2, that council approve option, that's that, I guess, at this point, as contained in the 2016 ward boundary review report from Dr. Williams dated November 2016. And 3, that a bylaw to implement option that we decide upon will be submitted to council for approval and that the required notice be provided to the public in that regard. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councilor Bilsma and Councilor Bell. It is now open to members of committee to discuss with regards to this recommendation. Is there anybody that wishes to discuss this at this time? Councilor Bilsma.
Thank you very much, and Dr. Williams as well, for your presentation. And I think that since 1970, this is long overdue. Really noticed it in the last election. I think that was where there was quite a substantial change in the way the numbers went, and there's certainly an underrepresentation by the members in Ward 3. So I was excited to see this issue come up. It was one of the very first things that I quizzed about when I came on as a councillor. As for option 1 or 2, I really don't see much of a difference between the two. So for the sake of maybe forwarding a discussion, just because 1 comes before 2, I'd like to move that we put 1 in as option number 1 and see where the discussion goes, just to kind of propel the discussion forward. So I'd like to make a motion. I would like to make, I guess it would be amendment, wouldn't it be, or a motion?
As long as you're moved.
Yeah, so I'd like to move that the option 1 is the one that's,
Seconder is in favor of putting 1 in both
That would be
of
Councilor
the
Bell.
recommendation 2 and recommendation 3.
I think we should have a discussion before we
Oh, okay.
put a recommendation. Not that I'm
I
opposed
think
to
we
No.
should lose it before we have the discussion.
it. I think we should just carry on with the discussion and then.
yeah, I didn't know how
Is there
to.
anything else?
No, then that's all. Thank you.
Councilor Bell?
I'd like to thank Dr. Williams. It was a great report, very extensive, long overdue. I guess one of the points that he made is that you're never going to get this balanced out population-wise. Ward 3 is going to continue to grow, and that's just the nature of the beast. I do agree with Councilor Bilsma. I like option 1. It's probably the closest to being balanced as we're going to get. I just think that option 1 is bringing in part of Ward 2 that they're on urban services now, and it's not a major adjustment, and it's part of the growth. So option 1 is the one that I would favor for sure when it comes time to do that, and that's all. That's it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else on this side? Councilor DeMille?
Okay. I also am supporting option one. As I went through, I thought we're never going to have equality, and that was very obvious from the beginning of the report. Ward 3 will still be underrepresented, but I like the idea that at least the other two wards have been brought closer together. And I think in fairness, if we can at least moderate between two wards, we can then at some point in time watch what happens with those numbers as we make the decision going forward. And Ward 3 obviously is going to continue to be a bit of a problem. But I did think it was a very good report, and the options were clear, the ideas behind them were very clear, and when you compare where those roads go, option one stood out to me as being the best choice as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I sat down with Mr. Williams. Thank you. It was a nice afternoon we spent. Spent about a good hour and a half speaking. I learned a lot. It was great. And I reviewed both your options. And talking to you, getting some information on how you felt we were represented and your thoughts to me. I don't know if you can remember, but we don't have to go back and say what you thought was warranted. I'm not in favor with either option, and one of my main reasons why I'm not in favor and keeping it the same is I don't feel that it's up to council to decide if they're representing the wards properly. I think it's up to our constituents to decide if they're represented properly. And to leave it up to me saying, where these boundaries have changed, and to leave it up to me saying that, if they're satisfied with the representation they have, it should be entirely up to the constituents to decide if they want to expand or to get more representation or what. I don't feel that it's council's decision to just pretty much be a dictator here and saying, well, sorry, you're no longer in Ward 3, you're in Ward 1 now, and you deal with councilor whoever is elected. Maybe they're satisfied with their so I'm just, my examples here is maybe they're satisfied with the representation, and I'm just going to use my ward for example here, like in Ward 1, maybe they're happy with the representation that they're getting from Ward 3, and now that they've came accustomed to those two councillors, and all of a sudden now, too bad, you're not getting Councillor Bell or Councillor Gannan that you liked, or now you're stuck with Jason Trombetta. So it's just my feeling that this is something that should be put, and we had this discussion, this is something that we should have put maybe, and I don't know if we can, on a ballot when someone's going to select a councilman or a mayor, and put down there, and I don't know if we can or not, but this is just a thought, and it's put down there as an option saying, are you happy with the representation in your ward? Do you want to see more? Do you want to see your ward change into whatever? I just feel that, like I said, if our wards change, these people know the people that are out there, they're happy with the service that they're getting, and all of a sudden we just do a big flop and change, and then they're going to say, like I said, they might be happy with Councillor Gannan and Councillor Bell, and they're going to be happy with Councillor Chichuk and Councillor Bosma, but then, hey, we just have to tell them, say, sorry, your favorite councillor that you have in your ward is no longer there. Now you're dealing with, go pick Councillor Trombetta and Councillor Rayner. And, I just find that's not fair to the people. So I think the people should decide if the ward should expand or not. So I'm not in favor of this. That's just how I feel inside, and I don't know if any other members feel the same I do. Maybe not, but that's where I'm at. But I appreciate your hard work, Mr. Williams, and your dedication to helping us out here. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Trombetta. Anybody else on the left side of me? Councillor Gannan.
Just if I could go back to, in answer, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Trombetta. The people who live along Highway 3, along Highway 20 in Ward 3, very much, I think, have a difficult time identifying with Smithville. So although you're apprehensive about how they might feel, I think they're happy enough with the representation. I know that I heard comments about Councillor Bell, and obviously they helped to elect me. But when you talk to them, a lot of them socialize back and forth and see at various functions in the township, people that they know well through the farming community, the rural community. So I'm not as convinced it would be as difficult for those people to become part of a larger rural ward, so to speak. I sort of appreciate your concern, but I think that it's not as big a concern to the people out there as you think it might be. Anyway.
Anybody else? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say right from the very beginning that I am in favor of option 1, just quite simply. If you look at the population and variance in wards, option 1, that the population is very close. You've got 3,950 to 3,986, so they're very close in size. And then you got Ward 3, obviously, it's a little larger at 5,901. I can understand where Councillor Trombetta is coming from and his rationale. I really do. I understand it. But that would mean a referendum. And if we were to have a referendum in 2018, then that means that the next time that this would change would be not until 2022. And I think if we wait until 2022, in my estimation, it will be so far gone. And I mean, as far as the rationale with the population vote, like, quite honestly, Ward 3 is going to grow exponentially at a lot faster pace than Ward 1 and Ward 2 is going to grow. So that is kind of like the only reason why I wouldn't be in favor of a referendum. So I'll just put my 2 cents in that I will be voting for option 1. Thank you, sir.
Okay, your 2 cents is duly noted, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else? Councillor Chicho.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the work that has been put into this. Thank you very much for the report. I still have questions about, my question was, from the very beginning, as the good doctor has pointed out, we've had growth, but I'm not really sure whether or not it's actually changed the dynamic or the shape of what it is we've been. From the very beginning, we probably had a larger urban population. If we were to go back, and the 2 rural wards were probably smaller. So whether or not there's actually any disruption from the very beginning is a question that I would have liked to have had answered, but wasn't referenced in any of the study. But that's okay. And I think that if we look at the fact that our statistics for the future growth, that we all talk about how quickly we're going to grow, but in fact the growth is suggested that we'll be running between 100 houses. And if we look at the average growth being 3 to 3.5 people per house in the next election, 4 years of 100 units of construction will probably get us to 12 to 1,500 people in the next wave or the next election, at which time there is a need for the region to look at something, which changes the dynamic that we may want to look at, because I'd sure like to know that they are going to take a look at the dynamics, because West Lincoln has 1 regional representative, and that truly is the saddest part of what it is that goes on in my books, because certainly the mayor of our municipality and others, but if ours is supposed to be growing, ours is misrepresented at the regional level, and we should saddle the mayor with a lot of meetings and a lot of information to get caught up on. So that worries me, and if that's going to happen in 2022, I worry about doing this now. I also worry about the fact that this isn't an issue that became pertinent. So to Councillor Trombetta wanting to do a referendum, we do have people that come out to vote, and probably largely to the same degree as they do in any other municipality. I think we had about 28% of the population out last time. So the concern I have is that getting people out, this wasn't the issue to bring people out. I attended the 3 open houses, and we had between 1 and 7 people out who had some questions, but largely this wasn't the topic on their mind. And we certainly had other items that have drawn the people of West Lincoln out. And I guess the part that concerns me the most about either of these options is the fact that I don't want to see us go to an us and them. And whoever designed the last way that we did it, maybe the future comes to Ward 3 becoming 2 wards if as we grow, and we start that way, is that rural versus urban is not a discussion I want to have. And while we've got rural and urban in Ward 3, we virtually lose any kind of proximity, which makes, I think, it a very difficult discussion for us to have when it comes to making decisions. While we have our own personal biases, and we try to take those out, and we are here for the good of the entire community, you know, I'm going to say it. Politicians who want to be lifelong politicians have a tendency to want to vote so the way that it is that they're going to get elected again. That happens. And I would hate to see major issues regarding this municipality come down to the fact that we are rural versus urban representation. So I worry about moving to a place where we have divided the line such that we cast artificial lines to a place where we're not there. And I will totally say that in the past 6 years that I've had the honor to sit on this council, I have heard from people from all over this municipality, as I'm sure most councillors have. And I think anyone that wants to get, something approved has become clever enough as a group to, in fact, enlist the support of all members of council, be it developers or public representatives. So I don't, in one way, I don't think that there's an urban boundary, there is a ward boundary limitation anymore. People are getting smarter. They're becoming more aware of what it takes to get something through, and they're trying to convince all members of council, regardless of what they represent. But our municipality still does have a large rural population, and I hear the battles about you don't pay enough because your taxes are lower in the rural area, but we pay the lion's share, and we have some major decisions that have to come up in the near future where I would hate to see further divisiveness. This community has changed something. To keep what we have for the rest of our lives, I don't think so. To look at it again in 2022, I think is important because I think we will have modest growth. Because even if what we want to do, by the time servicing happens, et cetera, you aren't going to get to the next election with any wave. There will not be a tsunami. There might be a silver tsunami, everybody moving into. That's the new word for aging population, by the way. But I don't think that there's going to be any major wave of population growth that we can't. It may throw Ward 3 out somewhat by 2022, but we could look at it again. I'm just thinking, Mr. Chair, that there have been ups and downs within our community of recent times, and those issues that specifically go to one area. I think we've handled them incredibly well as a council, as a group, and I guess my heart aches for the fact that we will not share in the urbanism of West Lincoln. And I would hate to think that we were having a numbers game on issues that was purely politically drawn. And I guess that is my Soul South issue. By the way, that creek, the confusion about that water course, I guess it's the same problem people have, although they vote in the right places along the town of Waynfleet, because that is and I have to say I've knocked on doors that were in Waynfleet because I lost the river. But in fact, it comes down to being the boundary that the good doctor said was the natural severance. So we can't call it one thing in one place and the province call it. Our municipality has a boundary that is in fact the irregularity of the Chippewa. So I guess for me, looking at those natural splits, looking at some way of achieving this, I think a lot of work went into it. I appreciate the two options, But golly, it really doesn't leave me comfortable that we have done good service to our community. Thank you.
Councillor
Just a quick question. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this goes to Mr. Williams. When does this, Dr. Williams, sorry, when does this come up for review? Because obviously I'm in council 2 years now and it came up right now. So how many years goes by when this is a review for everyone?
If I may, it hasn't been done since 1970. It's completely optional. There is no requirement.
So my question is that, and I understand some of the concerns from the councillors of Ward 3. The thing is, so from 1970 to now, how many years is that? 46? Thanks for the math doing a joiner. Mine's not as good as yours. 46. So 46 years. I know you can call for a review anytime. The thing is, what happens obviously in 46 years where if we decide now and then they could have said, in 46 years, shit, pardon my language, or geez, we need 3 representations and 3 people representing Ward 3. We're stuck with only 2, right? Because obviously the growth and so on and so forth, right? So that's only my thing. Obviously, Ward 3, obviously it's going to be developed, and obviously with the urban boundary expansion, people are going to be coming in, and we're going to grow, and maybe they're going to need 3, but to wait 46 years for 3 representatives, I understand shrinking it, but I don't know if shrinking it is the key, because like I said, you're going to need possibly down the road 3 more. But anyway, it's just for clarity for me, Dr. Williams.
If I may, let's be clear about a couple of things. The idea of reviewing boundaries at the municipal level is entirely discretionary. It is up to council. Under the Act, you have the power to make the decision about how many and how to elect them, and what kinds of boundaries and so forth you would use. That is a power that has not ever been exercised by this council. I'm suggesting that the current situation really should push you toward taking some action. But you certainly have the power to say, no, we don't want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, it will stay the way it is until someone else raises the matter and a future council makes a decision to change this arrangement in some way, shape, or form. But it's not mandatory, and that's one of the differences. As I've pointed out in a couple of cases, federally and provincially, this happens every 10 years. There is a review. Does it still work? One of the reasons why you were electing an MPP on one set of boundaries and an MP on a different one is that the two of them haven't caught up yet. But the next election will be on new boundaries that will be reviewed after the next census. And I'm simply saying that you have been able to, I won't use the word avoid, you have been able to postpone reviewing the appropriateness of the representation system for what is pretty an inordinate amount of time compared to most other jurisdictions. But again, if you choose not to do it, I can't make you, the province can't make you. There is the possibility that a petition could be brought to you to require a change, but that's not what we're here to consider. We're trying to avoid having to go to that where you're forced to make a choice. So it's discretionary. It's up to the members of this council to decide, as I said in that last slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just want to say I love Ward 3. I love the residents of Ward 3. And changing these ward boundaries has absolutely nothing to do with servicing the residents of Ward 3, Ward 1, or Ward 2. Absolutely nothing to do with that, okay? As was stated by Councillor Chichak, we service all of the municipality, okay, whether it be Ward 1, Ward 2, or Ward 3. We all get calls from different wards, and we look after their needs, and we talk to them councillors. I don't understand the numbers game she referred to or the split between the urban and the rural. It's where we live. We live in an urban/rural area. Ward 3 is going to give up some of the rural area, but we're still going to have rural with us. And again, referring back, if I get a call from Ward 1, I'm going to address it, or Ward 2. So I don't understand the split of urban and rural, or further splitting the two against one another. And for voting and for numbers in council, I think this council's made great strides in moving forward with a lot of issues. And this is another one that's before us now. And it's something that is for the betterment of the municipality, I think, in the long run. And whether we delay it tonight and do what has been done in the past, not on this council, but past councils, let's put it off for the next council, let them deal with it. Personally, I'm not prepared to do that. I think option 1 is the way we need to look at going. And I disagree with splitting the urban and the agricultural. That's not going to happen. It's where we live and we all work together. And this council works together to get things done and move things forward. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, maybe it's appropriate at this time to put option 1 in. Oh, you haven't had your turn? Yeah, you're trying to get out of here on time. I noticed that the temperature's climbing too. That's Joanne learned something from. Anyways, okay. So if you want to, Mr. Chair, if you want to take the floor, at some point, I think in order to propel this, we've all now had a chance to speak of it in the abstract. So that's all I wanted to do.
Yes, it is.
And what was those attendance like for work? Can you go into that in some detail, please?
I'm not sure I can give you much detail. It was pretty low. That's true, and we've already allusions to that. There was not a lot of engagement at those 3 meetings.
Through you to the CEO, I was away on vacation in the land of the free in January, some 5,000 miles from here, come back in February to discover that this happened in January. I also think Councilor Trombetta was aware. Can you please enlighten maybe Councilor Trombetta and myself as to what precipitated this, since Dr. Williams said there's nothing legal to the province of Ontario that would have done this, nor has it contributed.
Through to Mr. Chair, through to Council, I would defer that to the clerk, Carolyn Langley, as this project falls under her portfolio, but it is time sensitive based on her recommendation.
Through you to members of the committee, as we previously discussed, and you missed that discussion, the issue of the urban boundary of Smithville has caused us some difficulties with the election in a number of elections that we've had, because the urban area spills into Ward 2, and the Ward 2 residents are not happy with the fact that they have to go all the way to Gainsborough to vote. And given that the population is growing and that is part of the urban area, it's something that should be looked at. As well, the imbalance between the wards as far as population goes is growing. This was looked at in 1997, and they decided to do nothing then, and it has only grown since then, so it's only appropriate to look at it again, and that's why it was brought forward.
So the reference to Dr. Williams, then it's not been 46 years since this has been looked at. This has been looked at in 1997, is that correct, Ms. Langley?
Through you, there was a report put forward, and Council of the Day decided to do nothing.
Okay. However, the concerns that you raised with regards to the people in Ward 2 and everything, Dr. Williams just indicated that there wasn't much of a concern when there was an open meeting in order for them to voice those concerns that you said they had. Is that not correct, Dr. Williams?
That is correct, but I don't think that's something that's unique to West Lincoln. This is not a topic that engages a lot of people in my experiences in close to 20 municipalities across Ontario. So I wouldn't say that the low turnout is somehow symptomatic of West Lincoln.
But through you, Ms. Langley, did you have a high representation of people that were upset having to drive so far?
We certainly had a number of complaints. I couldn't tell you how many, but it's something that has come up every single election.
It just seems, Dr. Williams, you're a professional in this field, that there's a concern, but when the opportunity, which costs the taxpayers of this township your service fee to come here and do something like this, and it's their opportunity to finally resolve these issues, which they brought up on a continuous basis, it seems to me like they're all blowing smoke, or am I reading this wrong?
I'm not about to second-guess your interpretation of it, Mr. Chair, but the fact is that if the system is broken, public participation is not something that will tell us that it's fixed. It's broken. That's my view. It is broken.
So when I look at this, and option 1 and option 2, as I discussed with you when we had our meetings, I am probably the only one in my ward, I think I can speak that clearly because by knocking on doors they tell me I'm the only one, that basically does the entire ward. I've not done it once, not twice, I've done it 3 times. It is a huge ward requiring thousands of times in and out of a vehicle, a lot of gas, a lot of time going down laneways, some of them nearly half a kilometer long just to get to a residence. It's extremely time consuming. I enjoy it. It's a chance to interact with people, and they enjoy it because it's an opportunity for them to have somebody that really cares coming down their driveway to show that they really want to represent them. However, increasing the boundary of Ward 1 would make that literally impossible to accomplish because the time restraints that we have when we start to when we finish, I can barely do what I can do now. So I understand, and from the very beginning when I was a counselor in 2003, I could not understand why Ward 3 went all the way down to Fulton. It didn't make sense to me because that was all rural. But when I actually knocked on all the doors, I understood partially why it probably was that way, because I could not physically have the time to do it unless I actually did it 7 days a week, meaning Sunday, which I refused to do. I was out 6 days a week. You can't do more than that. So that just seemed to not fit to me. And then with regards to looking after the wards, I get calls from other wards, and I'm representing the Township of West Lincoln, not only my ward. So I don't have a problem interacting or calling the councillors in the other wards and interacting with them if there's a concern. The problem is, to me, is the time factor, trying to get this all in a reasonable period of time, which we're allowed, which I feel this size would make extremely difficult. That's probably the biggest problem, because this goes all the way to Mud Street now, which is considerably north of where the boundary is right now, which is 20 Road in Ward 1. That's a long distance. That's still a lot of rural properties. Unlike Ward 3, where I can park the car and I could probably do a whole day without moving my car, I can't do more than, if I went to Casterville, it's probably the only place that I do park the car and maybe go to 5 or 6 places. Other than that, I am in and out of the car every single time I'm going anywhere. It's so much more difficult, but that's the nature of the Township of West Lincoln. It's based its heritage on rural. It's now the urban that's starting to expand and come into us, but we are basically a rural community. So this is not unusual for me. But to expect to travel down these other side country roads in the duration that I've got is almost impossible, in which case I would say then that it's not fair to those individuals if they want to elect somebody, but that individual in all sincerity would like to go down and see them, but he hasn't got time because it's just too big. So I'm of the opinion of no change at this point, just basically because physically it's impossible to do it. And I understand the logic behind it. Looking at it, it makes sense to take Ward 3 away from the Fulton area because it's very rural. But it's just making one large area even larger, and to me, it's just not practical to be able to do it. Councillor Trombetta, you had a further question?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, maybe you've forgotten, Mr. Chair, that I also did knock on the doors. You weren't the only one. I saw your flyer there in the ditch a couple times, and blown on the so that just concurs what. Yeah, and they're not the only one that hit the doors in Ward 1. I hit quite a few myself. So
I said all of them.
But just to let you know, thank you.
That was it.
That's it. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, hold on.
Other boards also have counselors that walk to every door, so just so you know,
Every door, that's fine.
that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I call the question, please, if I could get a seconder?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Wait a second.
You know what I'm do, right?
All right. Okay, Councilor Bellsman has already
Yeah.
asked that word, that option 1 be put down as the one that's selected, and that was, is that a second agreed by Councilor Bell, who moved it the last time to second it? Is that correct? Okay, so option 1 then fits under number 2. Option 1 is contained in the 2016 ward boundary, and also number 2, the bylaw to implement option 1 be submitted. So all I have to do now is ask the question, is that correct? Okay, with regards.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can you, I can't remember, can you ask the clerk, can we call for a recorded vote in committee, or is that just council? Could I have a recorded vote, please?
Okay. So you're gonna have to. And that is for option 1.
Councillor Bell?
Yes.
Councillor Bilsma?
Yes.
Councillor Gann?
Yes.
Councillor Chichok?
No.
Councillor Trumpetta?
Nope.
Mayor Joyner?
Yes.
4-2.
So it's carried.
Excuse me,
Okay,
you would
thank
have
you,
to ask
Dr.
for
Lee.
Councillor Rayner's
Okay,
vote.
yeah.
Well, mine is also, but it's already in session. So, thank you, sir, for your
Sorry,
report.
4-3.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to fire department update, 87-16. Fire Chief Dennis Fisher, Fire Department's monthly update, WLFD-12-16, October 2016. Chief, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
A somewhat slow month, which is good for October. 17 calls for Station 1, 3 calls for Station 2, and a call down at the East End in Pelham. A few things over the month. Not much happening in fire prevention, nothing to do with the fleet. October 31st was our year end, fiscal year end. So Station 1 responded to 287 calls, Station 2 responded to 100, right on the nose. A few other things, both stations will be in the Santa Claus Parade on November 26th. So there'll be some fire trucks, the old stuff's coming out of the garage. And the Station 2 renos have been finalized. They actually started to do a little bit of work out there, so hopefully the septic starts next week before the frost gets in the ground, and then everything else will be interior. So hopefully that'll be done by the end of the year. Other than that, that's it.
Fire Chief, why so late with the septic?
Why so late with the septic?
No, you said they're gonna put underground stuff.
No, the
before
septic,
the
they have to
frost.
put a pony tank in for the septic because the one that's originally there isn't gonna be big enough. So they're trying to get in before the frost gets in the ground. So hopefully next week it goes in,
How come it wasn't done a couple months ago?
because we didn't have it finalized.
Because the cold is coming quickly,
Yes, it is.
and so's the wind for that matter. All right, very good. Any questions from members of the committee? Councilor Bell.
Through you, Mr. Rayner, to Chief, could you just give us a quick overview of what renovations are taking place at Station 2?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Val. They're putting in a 250-gallon pony tank to upgrade the septic system. They'll be putting in, reconfiguring the washroom that's there now as the handicap washroom. There'll be male and a female washroom with shower stalls and a small meeting room. So it'll basically take up the whole first bay, the existing first bay now. So, should be good.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thanks, Chief. You are dismissed. Item A88-16, Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, September 15, 2016. Information Report RFI-T-32-16, October 31st, 2016. Budget Status Report. 3, Information Report RFI-C-14, 2016, Measure to provide an accessibility election. And 4, Recommendation Report RFD-C-15, 2016, Approval of the 2016 Annual Progress Report of the 2013 to 2017 Multi-Year Accessibility Plan. Recommendation that the Administration Finance Fire Committee hereby approve the following consent agenda items. 1, Item 1B and is hereby accepted. 2, Items 2 and 3B and are hereby received for information, and that Item 4B and is hereby received, and that the recommendations contained therein are hereby adopted, with the exceptions of anything from members of committee. Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Chichak and Councillor Bilsma. Any further questions from members of committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Communications, there is nothing at this time. Staff report, item A90-16, Clerk Information Report, RFI-C-17-2016, Bill 181, Municipal Elections Act Amendments, Recommendation Report, RFI-C-17, 2016, dated November 21st, 2016, regarding Bill 181, Municipal Elections Act Amendment, be received for information. I need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Bell and Councillor Bilsma. Any further questions? Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Clerk, could you just give just a little bit more dialogue on this item of the Municipal Elections Act amendments, if you please?
Through you to members of council, or members of committee rather, there are many, many changes to the Municipal Elections Act that are outlined in the report. I could go through each one if that's what you'd like, but the most significant one is the ranked ballot one.
And that works in the process of?
Well, what that does is provides the opportunity for council to decide if they would like ranked ballot. Unfortunately, there are a lot of issues that come with that, in that our current equipment is unable to deal with a ranked ballot election. That's one thing, so we would have to replace our equipment. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and you would have to have all of the processes in place prior to May, or by May 2017 in order to do one. So that is problematic. They changed a lot of things. Let me just go to the report here. A lot of the dates changed, and they shortened. One of the big ones is they shortened the nomination period, where you used to sign up on the 1st of January. Now it doesn't happen until, I believe, May. And it's shortened significantly. And there's, let's go through the list for you. There's just such a large amount of changes that I tried to summarize them for you. So you have a shortened campaign period, new requirement for nomination. You have to have 25 endorsement signatures with your nomination package.
That was before. Didn't you have to have 10 before, and now they got rid of that, and now they're asking for 25?
Through you, there was a requirement for signatures in the past. I don't remember how many it was, but they did remove it, and now it's back.
Is family considered to be as well, or no?
It's it has to be someone that's eligible to be an elector.
So family can be
So,
an
yeah.
award.
Yeah.
How many kids you got?
Okay, so just a question on that, Madam Clerk, through you, Mr. Chair. How does it work?
Just don't have to leave the house.
Like, how can I, like, you can, if someone wants to get up there and verify the signatures, and do you have to call them yourself to say if they've signed this paper? Like, Where does the forgery come into play and all that kind of stuff? Since you have probably done this in the past.
Through you, well, we're waiting, sort of, there's lots more rules to come down with all of this. I suspect that what will happen is when the person endorses, they'll be required to sign a declaration saying that they would be eligible to vote in the election on the day that they sign. And there may be a requirement for the clerk to check those, but that is to be still spelled out. Additionally, there's a ban on donations from corporations and unions to candidates directly. There's also a requirement for the clerk to review campaign contributions once the financial statement is submitted. In the past, we didn't do that. There's a requirement for a policy on use of corporate resources. We do have one, so we would still have to adopt and make sure that it complies with the new requirements. There's a provision now that you have to provide identification on your campaign advertising signs, so you'd have to change your signs and put your name and some contact information on any campaign advertising.
So the signs that, you get to put your number and, so I got to throw all my signs out, get some stickers.
Yeah, or add it somehow.
Just curiosity. Use his flyers.
There are new rules for third-party advertising, and they're quite extensive, but what that enables someone to do is, since a corporation is not allowed to make donations, a third-party advertiser could register with the clerk and is able to take donations and do advertising. So that's a new thing. And then there is a requirement for broadcasters and publishers of any campaign advertisements to retain information regarding the campaign for 4 years. There's a requirement for candidates to be able to access apartment buildings to campaign. I guess in big cities that was a problem. Now they're obligated to let them in. There's certain hours for that. Failure to file your financial statement has some changes. So it used to be that you would get a refund of your your nomination fee if you had 2% of the vote. Now you only get it if you file your financial statement. There's also an ability, if you haven't filed on time, you can pay $500 to file 30 days beyond the date that you were supposed to file, but you forfeit your refund of your nomination. Advance voting used to be established by bylaw. It's now established by the clerk and not by the council, so I wouldn't have to pass a bylaw anymore. There's a requirement that voters are prohibited from photographing or video recording their marked ballot. They weren't supposed to do it, but now it's enshrined in the regulations. The date for the preparation of the voters list has changed somewhat. Not a huge change, but nonetheless it's there. And vote counting equipment and alternative voting methods, now you have to pass a bylaw by May 1st of 2000, in this case 2017, and so you have to have all your voting processes in place before that date. The deadline for a question on the ballot would be now March 1st, where it used to be June 1st of an election year. Accessibility, as you see, I provided a report on the measures that were taken to make the election accessible. In the future, I have to present a plan before the election as well as report after the election. So that's an additional thing we have to do. We have the opportunity to pass a policy on recount procedures, which we didn't do in the past. And there are new offenses for the offer penalty, which means that if it's an offense to offer, give, lend, or promise, or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in order to induce a person to become a candidate or refrain from becoming a candidate or withdraw his or her candidacy. So that's a new item in the Election Act. Electronic documents, I'm now able to provide for electronic filing of certain statements, financial statements, and which didn't occur in the past, and options to use the ranked ballot, of course, is the big one. And let me see, some of the dates for the calendars have changed. I went over a few of them with you, and that's the biggest changes that are outlined for you. So it makes for a lot of changes for us to deal with in the upcoming election with processes and things that we'll have to deal with.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, this is all taking place and be finalized by the 2018?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk.
Any further questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Other business, item A91-16, CAO Chris Carter, reemployment professional accomplishments. Mr. Carter, you want to say something there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the members of council, again, this is just part of our educational / employee empowerment program that we've implemented. Congratulations to Ms. DeFilippis. Unfortunately, she had to leave. She had another commitment tonight, and she couldn't wait any longer. But anyways, congratulations to the Director of Finance. And again, this is just another certificate that staff has accomplished within the past at least 2.5 years that I've been with the corporation. I know there's been staff before that, but anyways, it's not like I'm counting, but I am. And congratulations to all the staff so far, and especially Donna. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations, Donna, wherever you are. Item A92-16 is member of committee verbal updates from members of boards and committees, if there's any. Are there any? And there are. Councillor Bell.
Just want to say, Regional Road 12, they arranged a tour of the Durham York Energy Center. And what it is, it's the most modern, high-tech facility for waste that you're probably going to see. It's they'll take in 100 tons of waste, and at the end of the day, when they're done, they've got 10% of it left. It incinerates it, and at the end of the incineration of that 10%, they remove another 5% through the metals that are taken out and sold, whether they be steel or precious metals, your copper, your silver, things like that. And the rest comes out as a fly ash or a bottom ash. The bottom ash is like a stone, and they actually sell that to different facilities for using it. And one they're looking at right now is St. Mary's, which is about 2 kilometers away from this facility, to using cement and whatnot. It's quite a thing to see it, and it's quite impressive. The materials they burn is actually garbage. After everything has been recycled from Durham and from York, whatever cannot be recycled goes to this facility. So you need quite a bit of garbage to make this thing work and breathe. I know that Niagara and Hamilton looked at something a few years back. It didn't quite work out, and I'm sure moving forward they'd be interested in looking at something like this. It's going to be quite a ways. It took them 11 years to get the MOE approvals and the rest of the government approvals that was required. It took them 3 years to build the facility. They did 1 year of testing before certification come through, and they've been running now for 1 year. So it's basically a 15-year project from start to finish. Moving forward, when other regions come on side to build it, they're going to have a lot of information at their disposal and should make it easier for them. But the cost is phenomenal. It's not the kind of thing that small communities could look at. But it is interesting. You ever get the opportunity or look it up on the website, it's something you might want to see. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, moving on to items A93-16, members of committee, other business items of informative nature. Anybody have anything? Well, I have one. Everybody knows my passion and love, and I know it's not what the majority of them here have, but with this regards to this particular subject. But tonight's Hamilton Spectator, agricultural group fights urban sprawl, and it says here, proposed changes to the growth plan for Greater Golden Horseshoe and Greenbelt Plan fail to protect the majority of our farmers and farmlands from ongoing and poorly planned urban sprawl. Maintaining policy that enables status quo sprawl.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. This is not what this category is intended for. It's informative nature of some kind of event or festival that is happening within our municipality.
I didn't think you'd want to hear it, Mr. Mayor, so that doesn't surprise me, just reinforces what I thought. Anybody else have anything else would like to say at this time? All right, I guess that ends that very quickly. No, we're done. New business, confidential matters. I need a mover and a seconder to go on confidential, please. Councillor Chichak and Councillor Bell. Okay, we're going to go into close. This is with regards to a legal matter, personal matter about an individual, potential litigation, personal matters about an whatever it is, individual, including municipal and local board employees, litigation and potential litigation, including matters before administration tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And we've already got a mover and a seconder to go in, so we are going to go in, and we need to have it carried. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into close.
put the signs up.
Sure.